Hello and welcome to Signs and Wonders. Today I'm going to be doing a bit of stargazing. Now, astrologers, and I am an astrologer, although my website doesn't focus on astrology. Astrologers that I've known personally, or I've met over the years, or I know about because of their online work, well, we're all focused on this big conjunction coming up between the planets Jupiter and Saturn, which will be visible in the sky, which will look like one bright star, probably like the Star of Bethlehem. And this is going to happen just before the Winter Solstice at the end of 2020. Now, such a conjunction, such a visible conjunction in the sky would have been noticed by everybody in a time when there weren't any streetlights. And they were particularly noticed by the astrologers of the time, the Magi, the Zoroastrian priests who came to the stable or whatever the place was where Jesus was born. They followed the star because they knew something special was happening. They knew that a great new teacher was going to be born. So whether a great new teacher is going to be born on this occasion remains to be seen. But nonetheless, this change, this astrological change is big because both Jupiter and Saturn have been in the Earth sign of Capricorn and they're moving into the air sign of Aquarius. Now, one of the things that often happens with people who don't know much about astrology is they get puzzled by Aquarius when we say it's an air sign, because Aquarius is to do with water. And in translation, Aquarius, the constellation, is called the water carrier or the water bearer. And it's the figure of a person who is pouring water into the skies. And that area of the sky was called water by the ancients. And Aquarius is a human figure. He's not meant to be a god, he's meant to be a human figure pouring the water. And the water represents the gift of divine inspiration, perhaps the gift of peace for all humanity, concepts like that. And many people for quite a few years now have been talking about the age of Aquarius that's about to happen, when people will live in more harmony and we will perhaps have an age when people understand that we are actually united and we will function better if we collaborate rather than squabble with each other. So that is the predicted or hoped for vision of what the age of Aquarius might mean. And potentially this big conjunction coming up may be part of that big turning of the wheel that brings us into a new possibility. So Aquarius is the water carrier, but this is an air sign. So an air sign is to do with the mind, the way the mind works. So there's new ideas and new thoughts. But I also wanted to bring you to recognize that there is something fishy going on. Because when the water pours from the urn that Aquarius is carrying into the watery sky, right near the where the water pours out, in the area called water, there's a fish, and called the southern fish. Fomalhaut is a bright star in this tiny little constellation called the southern fish. And Fomalhaut was in ancient times regarded as a royal star, one of the 4 royal stars, sometimes called the Watchers. Now, what is the Watcher watching? Well, the 4 royal stars were on the 4 different parts of the compass. So they kind of make a tower, if you like, make a citadel of stars, 4 different stars, and they are associated sometimes with 4 archangels. So let me introduce you to Fomalhaut, and I'm going to do that by referring to a very excellent book. If you're interested in star lore, this is The Fixed Stars, Bernadette Brady's book of fixed stars. She is the most comprehensive modern writer on the topic. I do have one of my nice old astrology books, The Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology by Vivian Robson, which is a very classic. Nowadays, because Bernadette has written a really good up-to-date book, I do that. If you go to Bernadette Brady's website, you will find a lot more out about her work with the fixed stars, which is quite unique and special. So I recommend her work. And another thing she's written is called Star and Planet Combinations. And you can get various free downloads from her website, which will show you how the fixed stars might play a part, or will play a part, in your own life, in your own birth chart. But for the time being, I just want to introduce you to what she says about Fomalhaut. So she says, the fish drinks the flow from the urn of Aquarius. This stream-drinking fish is an early symbol of life and fertility, for it was the one who carried the egg, drinking the sperm or the river of life. So it's got a very reproductive image going on. This is also the fish in Celtic mythology, the fish that holds great wisdom and has gone through many incarnations as the fish that swallows the ring and the fish who is encountered on the journey the hero takes through the whirlpool. The Alpha star, this is a very bright star, Fomalhaut, is a lone bright star in its part of the starry sky. Now the Persians, around 3000 BCE, saw the constellation as one of the royal stars, called it the Watcher in the South, and it marked the winter solstice at that time. This is why I brought this topic up, because the winter solstice is when the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is going to happen. So in Persian mythology, there is a royal family or pantheon that stems from the time of Zoroaster, sometimes called Zarathustra, who was the Iranian prophet whose followers established the agricultural practice as a religious doctrine, she says. And his name, when translated into Greek, means star worshipper. So his stories and his pantheons and his god seem to capture the meaning of all the 4 royal stars of Persia. And later on in this series, I will look at the other 3 royal stars. So in that pantheon of stories that comes from the Zoroastrian tradition, there's a character called Zal, who as a baby was sent away by his father because of his strange physical appearance. Right? His visage was fair as the sun, but his hair was white like an old man. Now, I'm very interested in that because, of course, this is very close to an old story about Noah. And I think I might need another video to talk about the Noah context, because Noah was also, his family definitely were very suspicious when Noah was born, because he had a face and eyes that shone like the sun and his hair was white. So we have this story of some being who arrives in the world looking rather strange, but is also a herald for something to change. And of course, with Noah, it was the flood. So that's very much associated with the pouring of the waters. And the waters are clearing, they are cleansing in some ways. So I'm not sitting here suggesting that this new conjunction is going to herald a new flood in the literal sense of Noah's flood. But because this is association with new ideas and the fish and this character who, rather like Noah, is there to protect people from a flood, then perhaps we could look at the potential for what might happen with a new flood of ideas. Now, interestingly, when the Reformation was happening, there were predictions going on then because there were a lot of planets in Pisces leading up to that time. And some astrologers were saying, oh, there's going to be another flood. And the astrologer Liz Green points out, well, there wasn't a literal flood, but there was a flood of religious ideas, spiritual ideas. And that's very Piscean, we would say. And so here we are, 500 years later, when Pluto is also in Capricorn, as was going on at about that time. And we are faced with the potential for a flood of new ideas coming in. And the flood of new ideas, we hope, will be really positive for humanity to move forward into better ways of doing things. Certainly the Protestant reformers felt that there were better ways of doing their religious practices than they were already being offered by the Catholic Church. So this was the flood of ideas and spiritual intentions that meant that the Catholic Church lost its supremacy. So we could have a think about what are the ideas now at this time that hold supremacy, that perhaps need a flood of water pouring from the urn of Aquarius that will help to remove that supremacy and allow new ideas to arise, we hope, for the betterment of humanity. On the other hand, let's just look back at that historical period when the Protestant Reformation was rising like a tide of water to overcome the Catholic tyranny, you could say. What happened? Of course, the Catholic Church came back with what was called the Counter-Reformation. And it was tough. And it was hard for a lot of people. And there were inquisitions and there were difficult times for people. So that is also what can happen when new ideas flow in and threaten the status quo. Then people who want to go with the flow of the new ideas need to just be a little bit aware that there might be a counter movement. So that's all I've got today. That's not doom and gloom. That's definitely something new arriving, but also just a little prophetic warning that something new arriving can also be countered by the old entrenched ideas that want things to stay as they are. So let's look forward to this new conjunction. Let's look forward to what will happen in 2021 when both those planets start moving into squares with Uranus in Taurus. And Uranus wants to definitely overthrow the old and replace it with something new. It's a revolutionary planet. So there's a lot to look forward to, and there's a lot to consider. And there's a lot to actually, be aware of, keeping your counsel, keeping your antennae alert to what is going on for the collective, and understanding your role in that, and understanding how you, as a person, as an individual, as a spiritual seeker, how you want to work within that framework, what you can contribute to it and bring to your immediate circle, your family, your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Have a think about that in this time of great change, which we are already standing in, but which is going to accelerate, I believe, over the coming year. Many blessings. Keep meditating. That helps you stay centered when the seas are choppy. And keep shining. Blessings.